Hey there, I'm Dr. Midnight. Sit back, grab a drink, and let's take a quiet walk into the strange. You're safe here. For now. Picture a quiet Fresno neighborhood just after midnight. The air is still, the streetlights flicker, and somewhere a dog starts barking into the emptiness. You glance at your security monitor, expecting a stray cat, a raccoon, anything ordinary. Instead, you see this. Two pale shapes glide across your lawn. White, thin, no arms, no faces. Just legs. They move in perfect rhythm, silent and smooth, as if the ground itself is carrying them. That's not a dream. It's the real footage recorded in Fresno, California in 2007, the video that gave birth to one of the strangest cryptid mysteries in modern America. They would come to be called the Fresno Nightcrawlers, and nearly 20 years later, no one has ever proved what they are. This is more than a viral clip or a campfire legend. It's the story of one man's sleepless night, an investigation that reached national television, and a mystery that refuses to die. To understand it, we need to start with the man behind the camera. His name was Jose, a quiet, middle-aged man living with his family on the southern edge of Fresno. The neighborhood was simple. Small homes, chain-link, fences, patches of dry grass, and the hum of sprinklers before dawn. Jose wasn't looking for monsters. He was trying to stop bicycle thieves. A few weeks earlier, someone had cut through his yard and stolen his son's bike. So Jose bought an old secondhand CCTV system, wired cameras, a bulky VHS recorder, and a small monitor that he set beside his bed. Every night before turning in, he'd glance at the screen. Most nights showed nothing but the soft flicker of streetlight on concrete. Until one night in November. It was around 2 a.m. when the dog started barking, a sharp, panicked bark that ripped through the silence. Jose sat up instantly. He looked at the monitor. What he saw made him forget to breathe. Crossing his front yard were two pale figures, tall, slender, their bodies barely visible above their legs. They moved with a motion that didn't make sense. A slow glide. No bounce. No sound. For a moment, Jose thought the camera was malfunctioning. Then the smaller figure followed the larger one across the frame. Two of them, walking like living parachutes. His dog was still barking at the door. Jose shook his brother awake and pointed at the screen. The brother pulled back the curtain. Nothing outside. But on the monitor, the creatures kept walking slowly, methodically, until they faded into the dark edge of the yard. They did what any family would do. They stared in shock, whispered to each other, and waited for dawn. When morning came, Jose walked the yard looking for signs. There were small footprints, barely there, pressed into the dust near the walkway. Tiny, round marks about the size of a child's foot. No heel, no toes, just indentations as if something light had passed through. He decided to keep the tape. But there was a problem. The CCTV system recorded on a loop. Rewinding it would erase everything. So Jose grabbed his camcorder and filmed the monitor itself. That one decision, to record a screen with a camera, is the reason we have the only existing footage of the Fresno Nightcrawler today. For the next 2 weeks, Jose barely left the house. Friends said he kept the lights on at night and slept in short bursts. He told relatives he felt watched, that if he went outside alone, something might be waiting for him. The footage eventually made its way to a local Spanish-language TV station, a short segment for their evening broadcast. Viewers reacted instantly. Some called in saying they'd seen the same thing near the river. Others called it a ghost, a joke, or an alien. Among those viewers was a man named Víctor Camacho, a radio host and investigator of the paranormal who ran a show called Los Desvelados, the sleep-deprived. When he saw the clip, he immediately contacted the station. He wanted to meet the family and see the location himself. Jose agreed, but with conditions. No camera crews, no names, no faces on television. He just wanted someone to tell him what he'd captured, and that decision would draw Fresno's quietest resident into a mystery that still has no end. When the news clip aired, it was short. 20 seconds of grainy footage that no one could explain. But it reached exactly the right person. Víctor Camacho had spent years documenting UFO and paranormal cases across the Southwest. His radio show Los Desvelados was broadcast late at night, a lifeline for night shift workers, truckers, and insomniacs who tuned in to hear stories about the unknown. He'd heard plenty of hoaxes, but something about this one felt different. The movement, the shape, the fear in Jose's voice. Camacho called the Fresno Univision station the next morning and asked for a meeting. A reporter there told him the family doesn't want publicity. They just want answers. Camacho promised discretion. When he met Jose, he described him as nervous but polite, hands trembling slightly, eyes scanning the corners of the room. Jose spoke softly, his Spanish hesitant, repeating the same words again and again. No eran humanos. No eran humanos. They weren't human. Camacho listened carefully. He asked about lighting, camera placement, distances. Jose answered each question the same way. Steady, sincere, terrified. He hadn't altered anything, he just wanted to know what had walked across his yard. Camacho asked to see the scene himself. Together they stepped into the yard where the creatures had appeared. The tiles still showed faint dust prints, irregular, round, almost like smudges made by fabric brushing the ground. Camacho measured everything, the height of the fence, the angle of the camera, even the distance between each step in the footage. Based on scale, he estimated the being stood about 3 to 4 feet tall. That night, back in his office, Camacho ran the footage again and again, pausing on each frame. He noted there were no shadows from wires, no flicker consistent with editing cuts. The light from nearby street lamps stayed constant. There was no sign of post-production. He slowed the video down to a crawl, 1 frame per second. The taller figure lifted its leg forward in a graceful arc, its upper body folding slightly like a sail catching wind. The second, smaller figure followed in perfect rhythm. It didn't look mechanical. It looked alive. Camacho archived the footage, labeling it simply Fresno 2007. Then he began making calls, first to colleagues, then to MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, asking for independent analysis. Meanwhile, Jose and his family were struggling. Neighbors had heard about the story and started teasing them, calling their home La Casa de los Pantalones Fantasmas, the house of the ghost pants. Jose stopped answering the phone. His wife told Camacho she'd caught him checking the yard every night, standing in the dark with a flashlight, waiting. For him, this wasn't folklore. It was personal. Camacho later said that meeting Jose left a mark on him. He'd investigated dozens of sightings, but rarely had he seen fear like that. In his conference notes, he wrote, "The witness is credible. The event is unexplained." That phrase would follow the Nightcrawler case for years. In early 2008, Camacho presented the footage at a MUFON meeting. He played it twice, once at full speed, once slowed down. The room fell silent. Investigators leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Some whispered marionette, others CGI. But when the lights came back on, no one could agree on what they'd seen. Camacho's conclusion was cautious. I can't prove it's real, but I can't prove it's fake either. That balance, that refusal to decide, is partly why the story survived. Because in mysteries like this, uncertainty is the oxygen that keeps them alive. Over the following months, Camacho shared the case on his radio show. Callers phoned in from as far as New Mexico and Texas claiming to have seen similar shapes gliding through fields at night. None had video, only memories. Still, the story grew. By late 2008, internet forums had started calling the creatures the Fresno Nightcrawlers. The name stuck. Skeptics dismissed it immediately, another internet myth. But others saw something different. Proof that not every mystery had been filmed in the woods of the Pacific Northwest or deep in old folklore. This one came from a quiet neighborhood, from a man who wasn't chasing fame, and that made it feel real. By 2010, the strange tape from Fresno had drifted through every corner of the internet. Uploaded, compressed, re-uploaded, 1,000 times over. Each version blurrier than the last, each spawning its own crowd of believers and skeptics. But the question never changed. What were those things? That was when television came calling. The team from Fact or Faked, Paranormal Files, specialized in taking viral mysteries and trying to recreate them. In early 2010, producers reached out to Víctor Camacho for permission to feature the Fresno Nightcrawler on an episode titled Unidentified Walking Object. They flew to California, set up shop in a quiet stretch of countryside, and built every version of the creature they could imagine. The first attempt used PVC pipe legs draped in white fabric. 2 crew members crouched behind a fence, pulling them forward on hidden strings. Under floodlights, it looked clumsy, mechanical. The second try used a child in oversized pants with suspenders connecting to the waist, forcing a stiff gait. The footage failed again, too bouncy, too human. Finally, they tried marionette rigs suspended from a line between trees, filmed from a distance with night vision cameras. It was closer, but still wrong. The motion lacked that eerie float, that slow, weightless drift seen in Jose's tape. When the episode aired, the verdict flashed across the screen in simple white text, unexplained. For a few seconds of primetime television, the Nightcrawler was alive again. Skeptics mocked the conclusion, calling it entertainment, not investigation. But for viewers who saw it that night, the feeling lingered. Something about that movement stayed in the mind long after the credits rolled. Less than a year later, another clip appeared online. This time the footage came from a private security camera near Yosemite Lakes Park, about 100 miles north of Fresno. 2 white figures crossed a dirt road, one taller, one shorter, illuminated by a motion light. They glided slowly, perfectly balanced, disappearing behind a line of trees. The owner of the footage never revealed their name. The clip was shared through local contractors who had set up cameras to catch vandals. What they caught instead looked almost identical to Jose's beings. Same gait, same smooth glide. The only difference? The camera was newer, the picture cleaner, and the creatures seemed slightly taller. When analysts compared both videos frame by frame, they found uncanny similarities. Step length, knee angle, the timing between each movement. If the Fresno tape was a hoax, the hoaxer had somehow recreated it perfectly years later in a different county, without a single mistake. That raised a bigger question. If it wasn't the same hoaxer, could it be the same creatures? The Yosemite clip reignited the online firestorm. YouTube commenters dissected it by the millisecond. Paranormal forums compared step patterns like crime scene analysts. Posts titled "Proof of the Fresno Nightcrawler" began trending across message boards like "Unexplained Mysteries" and "Above Top Secret." Skeptics accused believers of pixel worship. Believers accused skeptics of arrogance. Every frame was debated. Every compression artifact circled in red. Then the memes started. Someone slowed the footage and added circus music, calling them the walking pants. Another layered an ominous hum beneath the clip and claimed it was electromagnetic interference. Even through parody, fascination grew. Víctor Camacho watched the chaos from the sidelines. In interviews, he said he didn't believe the Yosemite video was fake, but he couldn't confirm it either. "All I can tell you," he said, "is that whatever walked through that yard in 2007 walked again in 2011. He speculated they might be biological entities, perhaps even extraterrestrial, short, thin, insect-like beings, moving with technology we don't understand. Other investigators disagreed. They argued the smoother motion was a giveaway, digital puppetry, not creatures. Yet no one ever produced the supposed puppets or location data. The clip existed in isolation, untethered to a source, like an urban legend in video form. By 2012, the Fresno Nightcrawler wasn't just a local curiosity. It had become the internet's newest cryptid. Mysterious, oddly gentle, and utterly unique. Fans drew artwork, created 3D renders, even crafted tiny plush versions of the creatures. What began as fear inside one family's living room had transformed into fascination worldwide. Some say that's the truest measure of a modern myth, when disbelief and belief become irrelevant and only wonder remains. Still, skeptics weren't done. They wanted to prove the footage once and for all fake. Every mystery invites two kinds of people, believers and those determined to tear belief apart. When the Fresno Nightcrawler began circulating online, the skeptics arrived like clockwork. They weren't cynics, just hunters of truth, photographers, video editors, visual effects artists. People who'd spent their lives spotting what others missed. The earliest attempt to explain the video came from an independent FX designer who claimed he could recreate it with household materials. He tied white fabric to a pair of wooden dowels, strung them between two trees, and filmed the setup in his backyard. The legs swung unevenly. The result looked clumsy, a puppet, not a phantom. He posted the test online with the caption, "See? It's just pants on a string." Within hours, the clip went viral, but even skeptics admitted the motion wasn't quite right. The real Nightcrawler glided. His puppet stumbled. A few months later, another creator tried again, using a small child in baggy white pants. They bent the upper body forward, hiding the head inside the clothing, forcing an awkward crawl. Filmed in the dark, it was unsettling, but still human. Critics said the legs in the original moved too slowly, too fluidly, to be a crawling person. The debate only grew louder. As technology advanced, so did the scrutiny. Video analysts began frame-by-frame breakdowns of the Fresno footage. They found something unexpected. Faint, vertical smears trailing the legs. A sign of analog ghosting. That meant the original tape was genuine VHS, not digital. One expert, speaking anonymously to a local paper, said, "If this were edited, it would have required frame-accurate compositing. Impossible with that system in 2007. In other words, either the creatures were real, or someone had built a very convincing hoax using only the tools of a security camera from the early 2000s. Still, skeptics focused on simpler answers. They pointed out how compression artifacts could erase fine details, like thin wires or fishing line. When a low-resolution video is re-recorded from a screen, details blur together, giving the illusion of smooth, weightless motion. Digital forensics experts explained it like this: our brains fill gaps. When the image quality collapses, we start seeing patterns that aren't really there. To some, that meant the Nightcrawler was a perfect storm of poor technology and imagination. There was one problem no one could solve: the original VHS. After Jose's death, his family moved away. The recording device was lost. The tape never recovered. Without it, there would be no high-fidelity analysis, no clean comparison, no way to prove anything. Every investigation since has been forced to rely on that single camcorder copy, the recording of a screen layered in analog noise, a ghost captured by a ghost of a camera. Skeptics call that convenient. Believers call it poetic. As the footage spread, theories evolved. Some claimed the entire thing was an art project, a guerrilla performance meant to test how quickly a local myth could form. Others insisted it was a viral marketing stunt for a film that never materialized. But when journalists searched for anyone willing to take credit, no one ever stepped forward. No name, no confession, nothing. Even skeptics began to splinter into camps. One side said puppet, the other said person. A third claimed it was simply an optical illusion. Two objects swinging on a clothesline, filmed at an angle that made them look alive. It should have died there. But then came the sound. In 2014, an online user claimed to have isolated faint background noise in the Fresno footage, a low humming, almost mechanical, buried beneath the static. Some said it was just tape hiss. Others thought it might be an electromagnetic interference pattern caused by whatever the creatures were. No one could reproduce it. But the idea of a sound, even a fake one, reignited the fascination. Audio engineers downloaded the file, equalized it, and posted their own spectrograms. Most found nothing but noise. Still, people swore they could hear a pulse, a rhythm that rose and fell as the Nightcrawler moved across the yard. The discovery didn't prove the footage was real. It just made it impossible to stop talking about it. By the late 2010s, the Nightcrawler had split its audience in two. The believers saw a living entity, quiet, harmless, alien. The skeptics saw human error, pixel ghosts, and wishful thinking. Yet neither side could fully dismiss the other, because every test, every recreation, every debunking fell just short of certainty. That's what keeps the Fresno Nightcrawler alive. It exists in the space between proof and imagination, a creature too strange to believe and too convincing to ignore. When no one can explain what's on a camera, imagination rushes in to fill the gaps. The Fresno Nightcrawler became a blank canvas, and everyone started painting their own version of the truth. The first serious theory came from Víctor Camacho himself. After studying the footage for months, he said he believed the Nightcrawlers could be biological entities, possibly extraterrestrial. He described them as insectoid, thin, built for a lighter world, maybe a planet with lower gravity, where tall, thin limbs could support the movement without strain. He compared their glide to the way deep-sea creatures move through water, slow, deliberate, efficient. If they are real, he once said, they may not walk. They may float. It was an elegant theory, the kind that sounds almost reasonable until you try to imagine two aliens strolling through a Fresno neighborhood at 2 a.m. Why here? Why then? Camacho admitted he didn't know. But his idea gave birth to the first wave of believers who saw the Nightcrawler as a visiting species, quiet observers moving through our world unseen. Some UFO researchers went even further. They noted that several alleged alien sightings from the same year described beings with long limbs and featureless bodies. Coincidence, perhaps. But for those already convinced, the Fresno Nightcrawler was part of a larger puzzle, one that stretched across the stars. Then came a stranger idea. What if the Nightcrawlers weren't from another planet, but from another dimension? The theory appeared on Cryptid forums in 2011 and quickly took hold. Posters pointed to the creature's weightless steps, their translucent glow, their vanishing into darkness without a trace. To them, this was classic evidence of an entity half in our reality, half in another, a being slipping through dimensions like light through water. The idea gained traction among those fascinated by the paranormal overlap between UFOs ghosts and cryptids. Maybe the Nightcrawlers weren't aliens at all. Maybe they were travelers, caught for a few seconds while crossing through. Supporters claimed the VHS interference around the creatures was proof of energy distortion, a side effect of dimensional rifts. Scientists dismissed that instantly, calling it analog artifacting. But the idea stuck because it felt like something beyond our understanding. To believers, it wasn't about proof, it was about possibility. Others looked closer to home. They said the Nightcrawler wasn't alien or interdimensional. It was spiritual. Early blog posts began linking the creatures to supposed Native American myths about stickmen said to protect the forests from human greed. The connection spread quickly online. But when folklorists looked into it, they found no record of such legends in documented tribal history. In other words, the story was invented. Yet, it resonated with people. There was something oddly comforting about the idea that these beings weren't monsters, but guardians, peaceful spirits quietly walking the earth. A local writer once described them as the angels of forgotten places. Too strange for heaven, too quiet for hell. A poetic explanation maybe, but one that suited their calm, silent appearance. Cryptid researchers took a different approach. They compared the Fresno Nightcrawler to creatures like Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, and the Dover Demon. Other strange beings that appeared suddenly, left minimal evidence, and vanished as quickly as they arrived. Unlike those legends, however, the Nightcrawler wasn't terrifying. It never chased anyone, never harmed anyone, never even looked threatening. That made it stand out. Most cryptids inspire fear. The Nightcrawler inspired curiosity. Some argued it might not be a creature at all, but a phenomenon, an atmospheric projection, or some kind of natural mirage created by overlapping light and fog. Others speculated about government experiments, robotic scouts or test drones disguised as organic beings. Theories piled on top of theories until the truth was buried under a mountain of speculation. Most legends start in the shadows and stay there, but every so often something strange walks out of the dark, and people fall in love with it. The Fresno Nightcrawler is one of those stories. It began with fear, a man watching his screen at 2 a.m. praying his camera was wrong. But over time, that fear softened into fascination. By the mid-2000s, the Nightcrawler had gone from cult secret to full-blown internet icon. Tumblr, Reddit, and DeviantArt were flooded with fan drawings. The creatures were no longer eyeless or eerie, they were cute, smiling, stylized like cartoon mascots swaying on spindly legs. People crocheted plush versions, designed stickers, even built Halloween decorations in their honor. One Etsy artist described them as friendly forest ghosts that just want to walk. The name Nightcrawler no longer sent chills, it sparked a grin. Somewhere between 2012 and 2016, the Nightcrawler crossed a line that few cryptids ever do. It became loved. Locally, the city of Fresno began to embrace its new monster. Murals appeared downtown, tall white figures walking across gray concrete walls. Local artists painted them on skateboards, T-shirts, and coffee mugs. What once terrified one man's family was now a symbol of pride. In interviews, residents said things like, "Hey, if Bigfoot gets the Pacific Northwest, we deserve something too." For a city often associated with farmland and dry summers, the Nightcrawler gave Fresno something unique, something no other town had. some researchers now call the Fresno Nightcrawler the first true digital cryptid. Bigfoot came from word of mouth, the Loch Ness Monster from old photographs. But the Nightcrawler was born entirely online, conceived, shared, and reborn through screens. Its myth wasn't preserved in folklore or oral tradition, but in compression, pixels, and reposts. The more the image degraded, the stronger the legend grew. Even the glitches became part of its mythology, those soft streaks of light, the flicker of the VHS, the way the creatures seemed to dissolve into the air. Scholars studying online folklore now cite the Nightcrawler as an example of participatory myth-making, a story built not by one storyteller, but by thousands of people believing together. In 2020, a local Fresno artist named Splotch gained attention for her handcrafted Nightcrawler figurines, smooth, pale sculptures with tiny legs and sleepy faces. In an interview, she said, "I'd rather Fresno be known for the Nightcrawler than for our smog or our crime. At least this thing makes people smile." That sentiment captured what the Nightcrawler had become: hope wrapped in mystery. Today, if you visit Fresno and ask about the Nightcrawler, most people will smile. They'll tell you about the video, the art, or the plush dolls. For them, it's less about the footage and more about identity. It's their story, their mystery, their myth. But for all the warmth and humor the legend carries now, one thing still remains untouched: the question that started it all. What did Jose really see that night? Nearly 2 decades have passed since that quiet November night in Fresno. Jose is gone now. His house has changed owners. The yard is different. New grass, new lights, a new fence. But if you stand there long enough under the same sky, you can almost feel it. That strange stillness, that faint hum in the air. Time has a way of erasing details, but not stories. What Jose filmed that night refuses to fade. Because once something like that is seen, it never truly leaves us. It just waits. In tape hiss, in pixel static, in memory. We know the footage was real. Real as in, not CGI, not edited, not tampered with. We know a man pointed his camera at a monitor and saw something that should not have been there. We know the shape, the motion, the impossible grace. But we don't know what it was. Alien, spirit, puppet, illusion. The truth has always stayed just out of reach, gliding past us the way those pale legs crossed that yard. Before he passed away, Jose reportedly told a friend he'd stopped being afraid. He said that after years of replaying the tape, he realized something. They weren't here to hurt anyone. They were just walking. Somewhere out there, maybe in the forest outside Fresno, maybe in the hills beyond Yosemite, the Nightcrawlers walk. I'm Dr. Midnight. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.